Hello. Welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast is Success and Growth Affirmations.
I am so glad we are finally tackling this one.
Oh, me too. I want to start by painting a really vivid picture for you, the listener. I want you to truly immerse yourself in this scenario.
Set the stage.
Right. So it is a Monday morning, and you are stuck in the absolute thick of bustling Dhaka traffic.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is intense.
It really is. It's the kind of gridlock where, the concept of movement is just a distant memory. The air is thick with humidity and exhaust. Alarms are buzzing on your phone with all these incoming calendar notifications. Rickshaw bells are ringing and horns are just honking relentlessly in every single direction.
It's sensory overload, without a doubt.
Exactly. Spot on. The heat is rising both outside and inside the car.
Yep.
And you have this massive, really daunting day looming ahead of you.
It is basically the ultimate pressure cooker environment.
Undeniably. And maybe you have a high-stakes business presentation waiting for you at the office. Or, maybe you are just dreading the sheer amount of cognitive energy it takes to navigate a complex corporate environment in a second or third language.
Which is exhausting in itself.
Right. So in that moment, your default reaction, and let's be honest, the default reaction for the vast majority of human beings on the planet would be to groan, to tense your shoulders all the way up to your ears and just complain bitterly about the deadlines or the language barriers.
And that reaction makes perfect biological sense. We shouldn't judge that.
Really? Why is that?
Because the natural response to that level of sensory overload and impending pressure is to just trigger the body's stress cycle.
Yeah.
Your amygdala perceives a massive threat, your cortisol spikes, your breathing becomes incredibly shallow,
and your brain just shuts down the higher level stuff.
Specifically that. It diverts resources completely away from complex problem solving and straight into pure primal survival mode.
Wow, okay. But I want you, the listener, to imagine a totally different response. Imagine that instead of succumbing to that stress cycle in that chaotic, noisy car, you take one deep, intentional breath.
A real grounding breath.
Yeah. And you whisper to yourself, not as some desperate plea, but as a solid statement of fact. I am capable, I am growing, and success is my natural state.
I love the phrasing of that.
Right. And you don't just passively recite it like a robot. You anchor into it. You actually mean it. Suddenly, that tight, anxious knot in your stomach begins to loosen. A surge of focused, deliberate energy replaces the scattered panic.
You step out of the primal brain.
You do. You feel centered. You feel ready to step out of the car and just conquer the day. Now, I know to a lot of people tuning in right now, that scenario sounds a little too good to be true.
It sounds like fiction to a lot of people, for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like a kind of wishful thinking or self-help fluff you see pasted over a sunset on a social media feed.
It really does. Affirmations have, unfortunately, gained this reputation in some popular psychology circles as being, well, somewhat superficial.
Yeah, like toxic positivity almost.
Accurately stated, the perception is often that they are slapping a brightly colored, happy sticky note over the glaring hull of a sinking ship. People think, if I just smile and say I am rich, the universe will hand me a bag of money.
Which never happens.
Of course not. And when that doesn't happen, they discard the entire concept as total nonsense.
And that misconception is specifically the mission of our deep dive today. We are going to completely strip away that superficial fluff associated with positive thinking.
It is so necessary to do that.
Because for you, the learner out there who is actively striving to conquer a business presentation, master a complex new language, or just build unbreakable personal resilience in the face of life's daily gridlocks, we need you to understand that affirmations are not magic spells.
They are definitely not wishes.
Right. They are rigorous, deeply psychology-backed neurological tools designed for physically rewiring the structure of your brain.
That is the perfect baseline to establish right out of the gate. Affirmations are, at their core, concise, positive declarations that you repeat intentionally to overwrite long-standing limiting beliefs. Think of them as well like targeted interventions for your internal dialogue.
Targeted interventions, I like that.
Yeah, and to make them as effective as possible, we generally categorize them into two main camps that actually work best when they were woven together.
Okay, lay them out for us. What's the first camp?
First, you have success affirmations. These are the statements that target the triumphs, the external victories, and the tangible milestones.
Like reaching the actual goal.
Right. For example, a phrase like, I attract prosperity, or I deliver this presentation with absolute authority. They are heavily, heavily focused on the destination.
Okay, that makes sense. The destination is vital. But I mean, if we only focus on the finish line, we kind of miss the reality of the daily grind, right? So what is the second camp?
The second camp consists of growth affirmations. These emphasize the evolution, the internal journey, and the sheer resilience required to keep moving forward.
So it's more about the messy middle part.
Undeniably. Something along the lines of, I evolve with every experience, or I extract profound lessons from my setbacks. When you blend the two camps, success and growth, you create this incredibly holistic psychological power.
Because you're covering all your bases.
Yes. You are validating your ultimate ability to reach the pinnacle of your goal, but you are equally validating the difficult, beautiful process of getting there. You are literally telling your brain that the struggle itself is a sign of progress.
I love that distinction. Validating both the destination and the journey completely changes the framework. Now, we've established that whispering these phrases sounds good in traffic and, it might temporarily soothe your nerves, but I really want to know the mechanics behind it.
The hard science.
Yeah, why does a specific sequence of words actually change our physical and mental state? Let's unpack the neuroscience here, so you, the listener, know without a doubt that this isn't just a motivational poster, this is biology.
To truly understand the mechanics, we have to talk about a fascinating piece of neural real estate called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The RAS, okay.
Yeah.
What exactly, or rather, what specifically does that do?
It is a complex bundle of nerves located at our brainstem, and its primary job is to act as the ultimate filter for your reality. You see, your brain processes millions of bits of sensory information every single second.
Wait, millions of bits, literally?
Literally millions. Think about right now, before I mention it, were you consciously aware of the feeling of your socks against your skin?
No, definitely not.
Or the ambient hum of the refrigerator in the next room? Or the specific temperature of the air on the back of your neck?
No, my brain was completely ignoring all of that until you just pointed it out. Now it's all I can feel.
Accurately stated. If you were consciously aware of all of that data simultaneously, every single sound, sight, temperature change, and physical sensation, your cognitive processors would instantly short circuit.
You would just be paralyzed by the sheer volume of data.
Right. So the RAS acts as a highly discerning bouncer at the door of your conscious mind. It filters out the vast majority of that noise, and it only lets in information that falls into two categories.
Which are?
Things that threaten your immediate physical safety and things that validate your current deeply held beliefs.
Okay, let me try to put an analogy to this because this sounds undeniably like a social media algorithm.
Oh, that is a great way to frame it.
Right. Think about how those platforms work. If you spend your evening clicking on negative, self-doubting, pessimistic content like scrolling through endless videos that make you feel anxious about the economy or inadequate about your language skills, the algorithm registers your attention.
It takes notes on what you linger on.
Yeah. It says, oh, they spend a lot of time on this type of content. This is what they believe is important. And so what does it do? It feeds you more of it. It serves up more proof that the world is terrifying and that you cannot succeed. Your entire feed becomes just a monolithic wall of self-doubt.
That is an incredibly astute way to look at it. The RAS operates on the same principle of algorithmic reinforcement. If your internal dialogue is constantly looping the thought, I am terrible at speaking English, your RAS programs itself to prioritize evidence that validates that belief.
So it actively looks for failure.
Yes. When you walk into a room, it will completely ignore the 5 people nodding along to your ideas, and it will hyper-focus on the one person who briefly frowned, serving that up to your conscious mind as undeniable proof that you are failing.
Wow. So affirmations, then, are how you purposely retrain the biological algorithm.
Spot on.
When you repeat these phrases, you are manually entering new search parameters. You are looking the bouncer in the eye and telling the RAS, hey, my priorities have changed. I want to see content related to opportunity, capability, and growth.
You're giving it a new job.
And suddenly, because you've changed the filter, your brain starts showing you the opportunities that were actually sitting right in front of you the entire time, but that your old algorithm was actively hiding from you.
That is beautifully put. You are literally reprogramming the algorithm of your reality. And we are not just theorizing here. The hard clinical data backs this up.
Let's hear the data. I love the data.
There is a landmark 2023 meta-analysis published in the Journal of Positive Psychology, and subsequent research well past 2025 has only further confirmed and solidified this trend that looked at the specific measurable metrics of daily affirmation practice.
So they didn't just, ask people if they felt happier.
No, they didn't just ask how they felt. They measured physiological and academic outcomes. They found that just 15 minutes of daily targeted affirmations slashes generalized anxiety by a staggering 30%.
Wait. We need to pause on that number, 30%.
Yes, a 30% reduction.
Just from 15 minutes of repeating specific phrases. I mean, if a pharmaceutical company invented a pill with zero side effects that reliably dropped human anxiety by nearly a third in just 15 minutes a day, it would be $1 trillion enterprise.
It is a massive statistical drop. And it gets even more compelling for the learners and students tuning in right now. The same meta-analysis looked at academic performance.
Okay, what did they find there?
They found that students who incorporated this 15-minute practice saw their grade point averages boosted by an average of 0.5 points.
A 0.5 point boost purely from altering the internal narrative. That is the literal difference between a B and an A minus.
Without a doubt.
That is the difference between getting accepted into a top-tier university program or being placed on a wait list. That is not just some marginal gain. That is a life-altering trajectory shift.
It shifts everything.
But how is that actually happening on a biological, structural level? I understand the filtering of the RAS, but how does changing our thoughts boost our cognitive processing power so dramatically?
It all comes down to the miracle of neuroplasticity in action. For a very long time in the history of neuroscience, the consensus was that the adult brain was fixed.
Right, like you get what you get.
Yeah, the belief was that by the time you reached your mid-20s, your neural pathways were poured in concrete and you were stuck with the hardware you had. Now, thanks to modern imaging, we know that the brain is highly plastic. It is constantly molding, pruning, and rewiring itself based on how we use it.
So it's always changing.
Constantly. When we look at fMRI scans, functional magnetic resonance imaging of individuals who engage in sustained affirmation practices, we see something physically incredible. Repeated positive statements literally thicken the gray matter in the prefrontal cortex.
Hang on, let me push back on that for a second. When you say thicken, are you saying we are literally adding physical mass to our brain's command center just by talking to ourselves?
Yes.
Like doing bicep curls at the gym. Is it really that physical of a structural change?
It undeniably is. The prefrontal cortex is the brain's primary decision-making hub. It is the area responsible for complex cognitive behavior, emotional regulation, personality expression, and moderating social behavior.
Okay, the executive suite.
Right. When you repeat an affirmation, you are firing a specific sequence of neurons. In neuroscience, there is a fundamental principle. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Firing and wiring.
Exactly. Specifically that. The more you fire that specific positive pathway, the more the brain recognizes it as a high-traffic route. In response, the brain physically reinforces that pathway by wrapping the axons in thicker layers of myelin.
What is myelin?
Myelin is a fatty substance that acts like insulation on an electrical wire. Thicker myelin means the electrical signal travels faster, cleaner, and with far less energy loss.
That is fascinating. So to use a tech metaphor, it's like upgrading the underlying architecture of your smartphone. Upgrading your internal dialogue is akin to installing a cutting-edge operating system.
Spot on.
When you run this new, cleaner software, the deliberate affirmations, you are actively writing code that patches the old dysfunctional bugs. And those bugs represent your lingering doubts, your insecurities, and your imposter syndrome.
Yes, you're patching the system.
And because this new software is demanding a different kind of processing, the hardware itself, the physical neural pathways in your brain, adapts to accommodate it. The connections become stronger, more heavily insulated, and just lightning fast.
That metaphor is completely accurate. You are undeniably fortifying the physical, biological structure of your brain to run smoother, process complex information faster, and handle external stress with far more grace. You are building a more robust machine.
Okay, that completely changes the paradigm. If we are genuinely talking about upgrading our biological hardware and rewriting our psychological operating system, the next most urgent question for you, the listener, has to be, how do we actually write the code?
That is the next logical step.
Right. Because we understand the science of why it works. We know the stakes. But let's pivot to the mechanics of how. Because I imagine you can't just walk around mindlessly chanting, I am a billionaire astronaut who speaks 10 languages, and expect your prefrontal cortex to miraculously do the heavy lifting.
No, unfortunately.
There has to be a methodology.
You are absolutely right. A poorly constructed affirmation is like writing sloppy code. It will simply fail to execute. Your brain will reject it as a syntax error. There is a deeply intentional, highly specific architecture to an effective affirmation. We can break this down into a rigorous 5-step crafting process.
Let's unpack this framework thoroughly because this is the toolkit our listeners need to build their own. How do we initiate this process? What is the foundation?
The foundation, step 1, is to identify the blocks. You cannot successfully override a destructive program if you refuse to acknowledge what the malware actually is.
You have to find the virus first.
Yes. This requires a moment of radical honesty. It involves sitting down with a journal and actively writing out the negative leaping thoughts that you consistently struggle with. For instance, if you are learning a language or stepping into a new corporate role, you might write down, "I am inherently bad at public speaking," or "I will never sound natural or authoritative in English." You have to drag these shadow beliefs out into the light of day.
That makes profound sense. It's like diagnosing the check engine light on your dashboard before you just start aimlessly replacing parts under the hood. You have to know the specific point of failure.
Exactly.
So let's say I've done the journaling. I've looked at the ugly truth, and my core block is the belief. I am terrible at public speaking. People judge my accent. What is the next phase?
The next phase is the flip to positive. You take that deeply ingrained negative statement and you completely reverse its polarity. You don't soften it, you flip it.
Okay, give me an example of that.
So, "I am terrible at public speaking" flips directly to "I speak powerfully." It is simple, it is incredibly direct, and it surgically counteracts the specific insecurity you identified.
Okay, I see the logic there, but, and maybe it's just me, but "I speak powerfully" feels a little dry. It feels like reading a textbook. It lacks a certain pulse.
Which is an incredibly important observation, and it leads directly into the third phase. Add emotion and specificity. The human brain does not respond optimally to dry, sterile facts.
It needs flavor.
It needs imagery, emotion, and sensory detail. If an affirmation doesn't evoke a feeling, it won't signal the brain that it is important. So instead of stopping at the sterile "I speak powerfully," you upgrade the code to "I speak powerfully, completely captivating my audience."
Oh, that's much better.
Right. Now, you aren't just making a clinical statement, you are creating a cinematic scene in your mind. You are generating an emotional response. You can visualize the audience leaning in, their eyes locked on you, entirely captivated by your message.
Which gives that RAS filter we talked about a much clearer, more vibrant target to look for. It knows exactly what captivating looks like. That is brilliant. Let's move to the fourth piece of the architecture.
The fourth piece is incredibly strict regarding grammar. It must be formulated in the present tense using action verbs. The golden rule here is to always anchor the phrase with "I am," "I do," or "I create." You must completely eliminate the future tense from your affirmation vocabulary.
Wait, I want to challenge that. Why is the future tense such a problem? If I stand in the mirror and say, "I will be a great speaker next year," or "I am going to become fluent," isn't that inherently optimistic and positive? Why would that fail to execute?
It is optimistic, yes, but optimism is not the goal here. Neurological rewiring is. Using the future tense sends a very subtle yet highly destructive signal to your subconscious.
How so?
It tells your brain that the desired reality is always somewhere out there on the horizon, just out of reach. If you say, "I will be," your brain readily agrees. It says, "Okay, you're right, we will be someday, just not today. So we don't need to change our behavior today."
Oh, wow. It's an excuse to procrastinate.
Undeniably. It creates a perpetual, comfortable state of waiting. By forcing the statement into the present tense, "I speak powerfully," you issue a direct command to your brain to act as if this state is undeniably true right at this very second. This cognitive dissonance forces your current behavior, your posture, and your focus to immediately align with that declared reality.
That is a crucial, subtle distinction. The brain is literal. If you tell it the goal is in the future, it will gladly leave it in the future.
Okay, so we have identified the block, flipped the polarity, added emotional resonance, and locked it into the present tense. What completes the architecture?
The final phase is test the feel. This is your internal quality assurance check. You must read the newly crafted affirmation out loud.
And what are we looking for when we read it?
When you speak it, it must excite you. It must cause a palpable, slight shift in your physiology. You should notice yourself taking a slightly deeper breath, your spine straightening a fraction of an inch, or your shoulders dropping away from your ears.
A physical reaction. Yes. If the phrase falls flat, it feels hollow, or if it feels like a heavy, exhausting chore to say it, the code is still buggy. It needs adjustment. It absolutely has to resonate with your personal, authentic truth.
So that is a foundational architecture. It is logical, structured, and deliberate. But you mentioned earlier that there are advanced tweaks for the subconscious ways to hack this process even deeper. I want to dig extensively into those because I know our audience thrives on optimizing their routines and getting the absolute most out of every tool.
Let's dive into the advanced techniques. The first major tweak is layering senses. Human memories and core beliefs are deeply, inextricably tied to our physical senses: smell, touch, kinesthetic movement.
Right, like how a certain smell can instantly take you back to childhood.
Exactly. If you can add physical sensations to your spoken words, it anchors the new belief far deeper into your neural network. Instead of just stating the visual, "I succeed in my career," you layer a kinesthetic element onto it. "I feel a warm energy surging through my chest as I succeed." You are essentially giving your nervous system a full sensory dress rehearsal for the actual event.
Oh, I love that concept.
Yeah.
It's remarkably similar to how elite Olympic athletes use visualization.
It's the exact same principle.
They don't just picture crossing the finish line. They actively try to feel the specific texture of the track under their spikes. They imagine the smell of the stadium air. They feel the rush of wind against their face before the starting gun even fires. They prime the body. What's the next advanced tweak?
This next one is arguably one of the most clever psychological workarounds I have ever seen: the question form. Instead of making a declarative statement, you restructure your affirmation into an interrogative. You ask your brain a question.
Could give me an example.
For example, instead of saying, "I am highly successful," you ask, "Why am I so incredibly successful?"
Wait, hold on. I have to play devil's advocate here. If I am currently failing miserably, or if I am struggling deeply with a new language concept and feeling completely inadequate, and I look in the mirror and ask, "Why am I so incredibly successful?"
Yeah.
Isn't my brain going to immediately and violently reject that?
Seems like it would, right?
Yeah. Won't my inner critic just scream, "You aren't successful. You completely bombed that client call yesterday. You forgot all your vocabulary words."
That is exactly the reaction you would expect, but that is the genius of the question form. It actually bypasses that inner critic entirely.
Oh.
If you make a declarative statement like, "I am successful," your conscious mind's critical faculty can easily put up a massive brick wall and say, "No, you aren't. Here is the evidence of your failure." It treats the statement as a debate, and the critic usually wins. But the human brain is not naturally wired for debate.
What is it wired for?
It is, through millions of years of evolution, fundamentally hardwired as a problem-solving, answer-seeking machine. When you present it with a question, even a seemingly bizarre or contradictory one, the brain cannot help itself. It automatically bypasses the critical firewall and immediately starts searching its archives for answers to the prompt.
Oh, wow. It just goes to work.
Yes. It starts digging through your memories, your recent interactions, and your environment to find any scrap of evidence to answer the question, "Why am I so successful?" Suddenly, it starts noticing and serving up the small wins you had completely ignored.
That is incredibly sneaky. You are essentially giving your brain an inescapable homework assignment. You are exploiting its natural compulsion to close the loop on a question. It has no choice but to start finding proof of your success.
Spot on. It turns your inner critic into a private investigator looking for proof of your greatness.
I'm definitely using that one.
The final advanced tweak in our toolkit is cultural adaptation. This is about grounding the abstract concept of the affirmation into your specific local reality, making it viscerally yours.
Right. Making it relatable to your everyday life.
Let's use the context of Bangladesh, for example, since we opened with the Dhaka traffic scenario. Instead of using a generic, almost cliché Western affirmation like, "I am strong and immovable," you might blend the core intention with the profound resilience required to navigate the local environment.
Like the monsoons.
Yes, the monumental floods, the powerful monsoons. You might craft something like the mighty Padma River, my momentum flows unstoppable, carving its own path.
Okay, that gives me absolute chills.
Yeah.
Because it takes something conceptual and connects it to a massive, undeniable force of nature that the person understands on a primal level.
It creates an instant connection.
Everyone in that region understands the sheer, unrelenting power of the Padma River. It grounds the abstract concept of resilience into a very physical, geographical reality that the subconscious can immediately grasp and respect.
Specifically that. It makes the affirmation undeniable. You cannot argue with the power of the river, and therefore you cannot argue with the power of the affirmation.
It's brilliant.
But now, armed with all these tools, the structure, the sensory layering, the question hacks, the cultural grounding, we also have a responsibility to warn you about the pitfalls. The two most common traps that completely derail this process are being too vague and being overambitious.
Let's break those traps down in detail, starting with vague versus specific.
A classic vague affirmation is something like, "Good things happened to me today." It's a nice sentiment, but it completely lacks directional force. Your RAS doesn't know what a generic good thing looks like.
Right. Is it finding a coin on the sidewalk? Is it a good cup of coffee?
Exactly. Your brain won't prioritize it. A specific, targeted affirmation is, "Highly lucrative opportunities find me effortlessly in my corporate career." Now your brain has a highly specific directive. It starts scanning every email, every casual conversation in the break room, and every industry news article for those specific career opportunities.
It gives the sniper a target. And what about the overambitious trap? How can you be too ambitious with positive thinking?
This happens when the gap between your current reality and your affirmation is simply too vast for your brain to bridge. For example, loudly declaring, "I am the CEO of a Fortune 500 company tomorrow," when you're currently sitting in an entry-level intern position.
Yeah, your brain is just going to laugh at that.
It will immediately reject the code because the logistical leap is entirely illogical. It registers as a lie, and the exercise loses all credibility. Instead, you make the affirmation gradual, expansive, but believable. "I am confidently stepping into leadership and mastering my current domain." That is believable, it's highly actionable today, and it still pushes your trajectory upward.
Okay, let's pause, take a breath, and connect everything we've discussed so far back to the bigger picture for you, the listener. We have covered biological neuroscience. We have outlined the rigorous 5-step architecture. We've explored the advanced psychological tweaks. You have the ultimate blueprint.
The theory is solid.
But a perfectly crafted, culturally adapted, sensory-layered affirmation is utterly, completely useless if it just sits written down in a closed notebook buried in your nightstand drawer.
It really is.
Consistency is undeniably the single biggest hurdle here. Neuroplasticity requires repetition. So how do we practically embed this habit into the messy, unpredictable, exhausting reality of daily life?
This is where we shift our focus from theory to habit stacking and daily routines. The secret to consistency is that you cannot treat affirmations as a separate, burdensome chore that you have to find time for. You have to attach the affirmation to actions and habits you are already reliably doing every single day.
Let's map this out for the listener. Let's walk through a highly optimized daily timeline, starting from the moment they wake up. What is the morning routine?
I strongly recommend instituting the morning mirror ritual. It takes a maximum of 5 minutes. Before you look at your phone, before you check your emails, you stand in front of your bathroom mirror.
Okay.
And you make prolonged, direct eye contact with yourself while deliberately repeating your chosen phrases out loud.
That sounds incredibly simple on paper, but I know from my own personal experience that standing in silence and looking yourself directly in the eyes for 5 straight minutes is an intensely confronting experience. It brings up a massive wave of vulnerability and awkwardness.
It absolutely does, and that discomfort is exactly why it is so powerful. Think about it. We are rarely, if ever, that vulnerable with ourselves. We look in the mirror constantly, but we look to check our hair, to adjust our clothes, to look for flaws. We almost never look deeply into our own eyes with intention.
That's so true. We're always evaluating, not connecting.
Right. By maintaining that unwavering eye contact, you're essentially forcing your psyche to hold space for its own worth. You cannot look away from yourself. It breaks down the deeply entrenched barriers of self-judgment and shame far quicker than simply thinking the words while making breakfast.
So we start the day strong with a mirror. We've primed the brain. But what happens at, say, 1:00 p.m. when the chaos of the day hits? When that DACA traffic scenario from the intro happens, or when a massive project deadline gets moved up unexpectedly, the morning zen can evaporate pretty quickly.
That is specifically why you need the midday reset. And this is where we can leverage simple tech hacks. You don't have to rely on your memory. Set a recurring, non-negotiable phone reminder for a specific time, say 1:00 p.m.
And when it goes off?
When that alarm goes off, no matter what you were doing, you don't just briefly read the text on the screen and dismiss it. You use it as a trigger. You pair the reading of the affirmation with 3 incredibly deep physiological breaths.
In through the nose, out through the...
Yes. You inhale slowly through the nose, you mentally state the affirmation at the top of the breath, and you exhale deeply through the mouth. This combination actively resets your autonomic nervous system,
bringing you out of that stress cycle again.
Spot on. It forces a shift from the sympathetic fight-or-flight mode, lowering the cortisol spike of the stressful workday, back into the parasympathetic rest and digest mode, rapidly re-anchoring your cognitive focus.
It's like a circuit breaker for your stress loop. And finally, to close out the day, How do we ensure the brain processes all of this while we sleep?
You implement the evening gratitude practice. As you are winding down, lying in bed in that hypnagogic state just before sleep takes over, you repeat your core affirmations one last time. But here is the critical addition. You pair each affirmation with listing 3 highly specific, tangible wins from that exact day.
What if it was a terrible day? What if the presentation failed or you bombed a test?
The wins do not have to be massive. In fact, on bad days, they shouldn't be. They can be microscopic. I spoke up for 30 seconds in a meeting, or I finally understood a complex English idiom that confused me yesterday, or even I drank enough water.
Just giving the brain something positive to chew on.
By intentionally pairing your grand affirmations with tangible, undeniable proof of your daily growth, you prime your subconscious brain. As you sleep, your brain consolidates memories. You are essentially handing your brain a file folder labeled proof of success to process and integrate all night long.
I also love the idea of utilizing technology beyond just simple calendar alarms to build these habits. We live in an incredible era for audio. There are specialized tools like the affirmations.io app, or my personal favorite, creating a custom private Spotify or Apple Music playlist.
Making your own audio is incredibly effective.
You can sit in a quiet room, use a good microphone, and record your own voice speaking your affirmations over some calm, lo-fi beats, binaural frequencies, or classical music. You just let it play through your headphones while you commute on the train or drive in traffic. Hearing your own voice, the voice your brain trusts most calmly declaring your success and capability, is undeniably a powerful way to utilize dead time.
It is a phenomenal strategy. It turns an hour of frustrating commuting into an hour of passive neurological programming.
All right, I want to do an interactive exercise right now. A quick grammar and a vocabulary drill for you, the listener. Earlier, we talked about the architecture of flipping the negative block into a positive statement. Let's take a very common, very insidious, limiting belief that plagues almost anyone trying to learn a complex new skill or language. I can't learn fast.
That is perhaps the most universally common cognitive block in adult education.
Right. So I want you, the listener, to mentally rewrite that phrase right now. Take 5 seconds. But here's the catch. We aren't just going to do a basic flip and say, I learned fast. That is too basic. It's grayscale. We're going to upgrade the vocabulary to maximize the psychological impact.
Upgrade the code.
Exactly. We're going to shift I can't learn fast into I learn rapidly and retain it deeply. Notice the profound shift in energy there. We replace the generic word fast with rapidly, which carries a much more dynamic, aggressive, and active energy. And critically, we added the phrase, and retain it deeply, which directly addresses the silent fear behind the block, the fear of forgetting what you just learned.
That is a brilliant addition.
It is a complete holistic software patch for that specific multi-layered insecurity.
And exploring that specific transition leads us perfectly into the next crucial, expansive layer of this practice. If we are asking you to repeat these phrases daily, to hardwire them into your brain, then the actual specific words you choose to employ matter immensely.
Words are power.
They are. Words are not just sounds. They are the fundamental building blocks of our psychological reality.
I've been looking forward to this segment the most. We're going to transition into what we call the vocabulary of power. We have meticulously curated a list of 20 power words. Integrating these into your affirmations will absolutely supercharge your lexicon.
It really takes it to the next level.
For the language learners out there, this acts as an incredible high-level vocabulary builder. But far beyond that, it acts as a profound mindset shift. Using basic everyday words in your affirmations is like trying to paint a masterpiece using only grayscale. It's flat. But integrating power words is like painting in stunning high-definition color. It gives your subconscious a much richer, more vibrant, and highly detailed picture to work with.
Let's thoroughly unpack this lexicon. To make it digestible, we can group these 20 words by their specific psychological weight and the type of energy they invoke. Let's start with the first group, words that generate energy and movement.
First up in this group is vitality. This is a beautiful word.
Yeah.
It doesn't just mean having a bit of energy after a cup of coffee. Its root relates to life itself.
It implies a deep source.
Right. It means life force. Saying I have energy is grayscale. Saying vitality fills my body implies a boundless, natural, inexhaustible wellspring of life. It connects you to a deeper biological rhythm.
Next, we have propels. This word carries the weight of physics. It means driving forward with immense concentrated force. Like a rocket.
Yes, if you affirm, my daily action propels me toward my goals, you paint a mental picture of undeniable momentum. You become a body in motion that cannot be easily stopped by minor obstacles. It is the energy of a jet engine.
Then we have catalyst. I love the scientific imagery here. In chemistry, a catalyst is a substance that triggers or significantly accelerates a massive reaction without being consumed by the process itself.
That's a great definition.
If you say, I am a catalyst for my own success and the success of my team, you are taking ultimate sovereign responsibility for your environment. You aren't passively waiting for the market or the environment to change. You are declaring that you are the specific spark that forces the environment to transform around you.
Which pairs beautifully and logically with our next word, ignite. To spark suddenly into life and heat. My daily affirmations ignite my hidden passion.
It's very visual.
It transforms a dormant sleeping state into a blazing, visible fire. It's an incredibly active, highly visual word that the RAS can easily latch onto. And to round out the energy group, we have emanate. This means to give off energy, light, or presence directly from within. Unshakable positivity emanates from me.
I love how that feels to say.
When you use this word, you are telling your brain that you aren't just acting positive or reflecting someone else's good mood. You are the original source of the light. You are radiating it outward, altering the mood of everyone who steps into your radius.
Moving from the dynamic energy group, we need to build a strong foundation. Let's examine the strength and stability words. The first in this category is resilient.
A classic.
But so important. In material science, resilience is the ability of a substance to bounce back to its original shape after being bent, stretched, or compressed. I am infinitely resilient.
It doesn't mean you don't feel the pressure.
Accurately stated. It does not pretend that life is easy. It acknowledges that massive storms and pressures will come, but it is an ironclad promise to your psyche that you will return to your original shape or emerge an even stronger version of yourself once the pressure lifts.
Next is unwavering. Steady, resolute, unshaken by turbulence. My focus on my linguistic fluency is unwavering.
That is a tough one to master these days.
It really is. In our modern world of constant fractured digital distraction and shifting priorities, claiming unwavering focus is practically a superhuman trait. It means the chaos, the emails, and the doubts can swirl wildly around you, but your internal core remains perfectly still and locked on the target.
Then we have persevere. To persist deliberately despite overwhelming odds or prolonged difficulty. But I want to highlight a specific pairing here. I persevere joyfully.
Joyfully, that's an interesting addition.
Adding the adverb joyfully is a brilliant psychological hack. It takes the heavy, grinding suffering out of the concept of persistence and completely reframes it. It turns a grueling marathon into a triumphant, purposeful march.
I really love the visceral nature of this next one. Forge. To create something strong, usually associated with extreme heat, heavy strikes, and blacksmithing. I actively forge my own path.
It requires muscle.
You aren't just passively walking down a pre-paved, comfortable road created by someone else. You are taking raw materials, melting down massive obstacles, and hammering your own unique destiny into existence through sheer will. It is such a muscular, definitive, and powerful verb.
And to close out the stability group, harbor. Usually we think of a harbor as a safe geographical place for ships to drop anchor. Used psychologically, I harbor no doubts regarding my capability.
You're acting as the bouncer again.
Spot on. You are acknowledging that your mind is the marber, and you are acting as the strict harbor master. You are actively choosing what you allow to dock in your mind. You are vehemently refusing to give safe haven or anchorage to negativity.
Let's shift our focus to the final group, which is arguably the most expansive and aspirational, success and growth words. Starting with abundance. This means a vast plenty, an overflowing wealth of resources, whether that is money, time, love, or opportunity.
It counters scarcity directly.
Right. Abundance flows naturally to me. This word is critical because it moves your brain completely out of the evolutionary scarcity mindset. It tells your primal brain that there is no need to panic, there is no need to hoard, because there is more than enough pie for everyone.
Next is a word that often challenges people. Effortlessly, meaning without painful strain or grueling friction. I absorb new vocabulary effortlessly.
I feel like people push back on that one a lot.
They do, because we are deeply conditioned by society to believe that meaningful growth must be agonizingly painful. This word trains the brain to stop overcomplicating things, to look for the path of least resistance, and to allow new skills to integrate smoothly, much like a sponge absorbing water.
Empowered. having profound internal control and authority over your life's trajectory. I feel deeply empowered by my daily choices.
It completely eliminates the victim mentality.
Undeniably. You are no longer at the mercy of your boss, the economy, or your circumstances. You are in the driver's seat.
Radiant, shining brilliantly and clearly. My confidence in meetings is radiant. This is similar to emanate, but it implies a highly visible, undeniable brilliance. It is a confidence so bright that others in the room cannot help but notice and be drawn to it.
Thrive. To flourish greatly, to grow vigorously. I thrive in challenging environments. You are teaching your nervous system that you aren't just surviving the hard times. The hard times are the exact nutrient-rich soil you require to grow your deepest roots and largest branches.
Manifest. To make the theoretical real, I actively manifest my professional success.
Taking it from thought to reality.
Yes. This bridges the massive gap between the invisible, ethereal thought and the physical, tangible reality. It highlights the act of bringing something into physical existence through deliberate, sustained focus.
Pinnacle. The absolute highest, most successful point, the apex. I am steadily reaching the pinnacle of my industry. It sets the internal standard at the very top. You are telling your subconscious that you aren't aiming for the comfortable middle. You are packing your gear for the summit.
And here is a truly profound word that shifts entire paradigms. Sovereign. To be the supreme, absolute ruler of the self. I am completely sovereign over my own mind.
Let's pause and truly digest that word for a second. Sovereign. That is incredibly powerful.
It really is.
It evokes the imagery of kings and queens. It means you are the undisputed monarch of your own internal landscape. It means that no external criticism from a colleague, no terrible day stuck in DACA traffic, no rejection letter, and no failed exam has any authority over your self-worth unless you, the sovereign ruler, explicitly grant them permission to enter your kingdom. It is the ultimate boundary.
Spot on. It is the ultimate, uncompromising declaration of psychological independence.
We have two more words to complete the lexicon. Amplify. To drastically increase the volume, strength, or impact of something. I intentionally amplify my natural strengths.
Focus on what works.
You aren't wasting energy trying to fix every tiny weakness. You are turning the volume dial all the way up on the incredible talents you already possess.
And finally, culminate. To reach a definitive peak, climax, or final resultant stage, my years of effort culminate in absolute victory.
It gives a sense of an ending.
It provides the brain with a sense of sweeping narrative closure, ensuring that all your late nights and hard work are part of a story that is building toward a definitive, triumphant, and satisfying end.
That is an absolutely incredible linguistic toolkit. If you, the listener, take nothing else away from this hour, I challenge you to integrate just a handful of these high-definition power words into your daily internal monologue. The shift in your mental posture, your physical presence, and your overall reality will be undeniable.
But now we reach the most critical phase.
Application time.
Yes, a world-class tool is completely useless if it never leaves the toolbox. Let's do a comprehensive deep dive into 4 specific real-world domains where applying these precise affirmations delivers measurable, life-altering results.
Let's start with domain 1, career success and leadership. This is an arena where so many incredibly talented people hit invisible, frustrating barriers. Whether they are battling systemic glass ceilings or just fighting a crippling internal case of imposter syndrome. A powerful, architecturally sound affirmation here is, I negotiate confidently, securing the respect and compensation I inherently deserve.
That specific phrasing is absolutely vital, particularly in fiercely competitive global job markets. Assertiveness and self-advocacy are highly valued in these spaces, but they can be profoundly challenging for some learners depending on their cultural background or personal history.
Right, some cultures prioritize modesty over assertiveness.
Affirming your sovereign right to negotiate actively rewires your baseline self-worth before you even open the door to enter the boardroom.
We have some incredible documented stories to back this up and show how it works in practice. Take Raju, a brilliant but introverted tech entrepreneur based in Dhaka. He had an amazing product, but he was struggling immensely to break out of his small local market. His imposter syndrome kept him paralyzed.
So what did he do?
He started utilizing the affirmation, my network expands rapidly, opening lucrative doors. Notice that he wasn't delusionally affirming that he was suddenly a billionaire. He affirmed the specific mechanism of growth he needed, networking.
The RAS kicked in.
Within months, his heightened awareness, his freshly tuned RAS, helped him spot networking opportunities he would have previously scrolled past or shied away from. At a major tech conference, instead of hiding by the buffet table as he usually did, the affirmation propelled him forward. He approached a group of foreign investors, struck up a conversation, and landed his first major international client contract.
It shifted his behavior in the critical moment. Or consider the story of Aisha, who was unexpectedly thrust into a senior management role at a rapidly scaling startup.
Imposter syndrome city.
Oh, she felt entirely overwhelmed, plagued every morning by the thought that she wasn't a real boss and that everyone would soon realize she was a fraud. She adopted the powerful affirmation, "I lead my team with unwavering vision and calm authority."
Did it work?
By repeating that daily, she anchored herself. When her team faced a massive crisis, a major server outage during a product launch, her default reaction would have been panic. But instead, she leaned into the deeply ingrained identity of an unwavering leader. The affirmation became a self-fulfilling prophecy. She projected calm, the team fed off her energy, and they solved the crisis efficiently.
That is the raw power of identity shifting. Let's pivot and look at domain 2, language learning and academic growth. This is specifically for everyone listening who has hit that dreaded, demoralizing plateau panic.
That is the worst feeling.
That deeply frustrating feeling where you have reached an intermediate level in English or any skill, and you feel like you just aren't progressing anymore no matter how many flashcards you memorize.
For that specific plateau, an affirmation like, "I persevere joyfully through complex texts and retain knowledge deeply," is essential. It builds psychological grit.
Especially for standardized testing.
If you are preparing for a grueling, high-stakes exam like the IELTS, the TOEFL, or a medical board exam, your mental stamina and your ability to manage frustration are just as mathematically important as your actual grasp of the subject matter.
We saw the results of this with Priya, an advanced language learner who had a paralyzing fear of public speaking in her second language. She knew the vocabulary, but she would freeze under pressure. She started actively affirming, "I manifest absolute fluency and radiant confidence in all my conversations."
Did she use sensory layering?
She did. She used the sensory layering technique, visualizing the English words flowing effortlessly from her mouth like water. Because her prefrontal cortex was no longer being hijacked by the primal fear of making a grammatical mistake, her cognitive load dropped significantly.
Her natural ability could finally shine.
Her natural vocabulary, which was there all along, was finally able to surface. She ended up not just participating, but completely acing her university debates.
It entirely removes the internal friction. Let's shift our focus to domain 3, health, wellness, and personal challenges. The emerging science of the mind-gut axis and psychoneuroimmunology clearly shows us that our psychological state and our internal dialogue deeply and measurably impact our physical, cellular health and recovery times.
This is a connection people often miss.
Yeah.
Using an affirmation like, "Deep rest restores my sovereign vitality," can fundamentally change how your body physically recovers from exhaustion.
We have the beautiful story of Fatima for this one.
Yes, Fatima, who utilized specific affirmations for a post-Ramadan reset. After a full month of fasting, shifted sleep schedules, and extensive community commitments, her body was completely depleted.
Which is very common.
Her usual pattern was to push through the exhaustion, fueled by guilt. But by actively affirming her body's natural ability to amplify its healing, she gave her psyche permission to let go. She allowed herself the grace to rest deeply without the toxic overlay of guilt, which lowered her cortisol and led to a much faster, more complete physical recovery.
And on a much more intense scale, we also have the incredible anonymous story of a survivor of the catastrophic Dhaka floods. When you lose your home, your material possessions, and face the sheer devastation of a natural disaster, the psychological toll is unfathomable.
It's hard to even imagine.
This individual used the affirmation, "I forge unbreakable resilience from the fires of adversity." It is crucial to note that they were not practicing toxic positivity. They weren't denying the profound tragedy of the situation.
You weren't just saying everything is great.
No, instead, they were actively choosing to be the blacksmith of their own psychological recovery. They used the intense heat and pressure of the trauma to forge a vastly stronger, more resilient version of themselves to lead their family through the rebuilding process. That is a profound, awe-inspiring survival mechanism.
It truly is a testament to the human spirit. The final area we need to thoroughly cover is domain 4, financial abundance and creativity. Money is such an incredibly taboo subject in so many cultures, and it carries mountains of psychological baggage, shame, and limiting beliefs for people.
It absolutely does. Many people subconsciously harbor the deeply ingrained belief that wanting wealth is inherently greedy, or that their family history dictates they are destined to perpetually struggle.
It's generational sometimes.
Shifting that deep-seated narrative with an affirmation like, "Vast wealth flows to me sovereignly and consistently," completely changes the financial paradigm. It beautifully combines the psychological openness to spot opportunity with the practical, grounded reality of taking action like negotiating a raise, creating a budget, or making an investment.
We see this exact dynamic with Omar, a young professional who was desperately trying to save for his first home, but felt like he was always drowning in unexpected expenses. He felt cursed. He started affirming, "I am a powerful catalyst for my own prosperity."
He took control.
This single shift moved him entirely out of feeling like a helpless victim of inflation and transformed him into an active, sovereign manager of his resources. The affirmation propelled him to take the friction out of learning. He took weekend courses on financial literacy, he meticulously tracked his spending without shame, and he eventually secured the down payment for his home.
It also works absolute wonders for breaking through creative blocks. Affirming something like, "Brilliant ideas ignite within me effortlessly," tells your brain to stop stressing out while staring at the terrifying blank page, and instead commands it to start looking for the creative spark.
The Lena story.
Yes, we saw this with Lena, a graphic artist who was completely paralyzed by a severe case of artist's block. She felt her talent had dried up. She used this exact phrase. It relieved the crushing pressure of needing to produce a perfect, flawless idea immediately. She started just playing with shapes and concepts. The idea slowly ignited, and she recently launched a wildly successful sold-out design shop on Etsy.
Okay, I have to jump in here with a very specific piece of pushback regarding this domain.
Go for it.
When we talk about these financial and creative affirmations, if someone stands in their bathroom mirror every morning and repeats, "My income multiplies effortlessly," doesn't that run the serious risk of encouraging complacency or outright laziness?
I get that question a lot.
Because doesn't the brain hear the word effortlessly and decide to just sit on the couch, watch television, and wait for a magical check to arrive in the mail?
That is a very valid, incredibly common concern, but it fundamentally misunderstands how the subconscious mind processes the concept of effortlessly within this specific context. Affirmations, as we established at the very beginning of this hour, are not magical spells that replace the necessity of hard work and action.
They aren't genies in a bottle.
Right. They are psychological catalysts. When you boldly affirm that your income multiplies effortlessly, you are absolutely not telling your brain to stop working.
What are you telling?
You are telling your brain to stop fighting the exhausting friction of self-doubt, the paralyzing fear of failure, and the constant anxiety that makes the work feel so incredibly draining. It actively propels you into taking the right actions, sending the daunting email, making the difficult sales pitch, writing the complex code, creating the new product, without the heavy, exhausting strain of second-guessing your every move.
Oh, I see.
The action itself becomes effortless because the massive wall of psychological resistance has been entirely removed.
That makes perfect sense when you frame it that way.
Yeah.
It's exactly like taking the emergency parking brake off your car. You still have to put the car in gear, and you still have to press your foot firmly on the gas pedal to move forward, but you are no longer burning out your engine and destroying your transmission trying to fight your own internal resistance.
Exactly. Undeniably so. It is all about removing the friction to generate pure, unadulterated momentum.
Well, we have covered an immense, truly expansive amount of ground today. As we begin to wrap up this incredibly deep dive, let's comprehensively summarize the journey we have taken you on.
Let's recap.
You now understand on a biological level that affirmations are not wishful, fluffy thinking. They are the rigorous science of neuroplasticity in action. You understand precisely how the reticular activating system filters your reality, and you possess the tools to hack that filter to show you opportunities instead of obstacles.
You also possess the complete architectural blueprint. You know exactly how to identify your hidden blocks, flip them to the present tense using dynamic action verbs, and intricately layer them with deep emotion and physical sensory details.
That's a real science.
And you have the practical daily routines, from the vulnerability of the morning mirror ritual to the nervous system regulation of the midday reset, all the way to the evening gratitude practice, to firmly embed these habits into your life.
And perhaps most importantly, you have an unparalleled arsenal of high-definition power words. Words like sovereign, forge, catalyst, resilient, and unwavering, ready to be strategically deployed across the battlefields of your career, your language learning, your physical health, and your financial growth.
You have everything you need.
The directive for you, the listener, is incredibly simple. Commit to this today. Do not wait for a perfect Monday morning. Pick 5 specific affirmations right now. Write them down on a card. Repeat them relentlessly, daily, without fail, and watch as you track the undeniable transformations in your reality.
I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over as you navigate the rest of your day, your week, and your life. Every single one of us has a constant running internal monologue. It is the only voice you are forced to listen to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for the entire duration of your life.
Always there.
Always. Imagine the sheer, undeniable, world-altering power you would unlock. What specifically happens to your life, your ambitious goals, and your physical reality when that relentless internal voice finally stops being your harshest critic and transforms into your most unwavering, powerful ally?
Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.